My name is Blair Monroe. And the last thing my father ever said to me across the family table wasn't, I'm proud of you. It was, girls like you don't build empires, Blair. They build excuses. That sentence didn't just end dinner. It ended whatever part of me still hoped he'd see me. The room froze. My mother adjusted her napkin like nothing happened. My brothers traded glances that said more than applause ever could. And I just sat there, fork untouched, watching rosemary and silence settle into the air like smoke. I walked out without another word, past the hallway of family portraits where my face always sat at the edge, the extra, the afterthought. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I drove. Nowhere in particular, just away. Away from Blue Hill. Away from every Sunday dinner where I'd been measured and dismissed. Because even though my father had said it like a verdict, something in me refused to believe it. Quietly. Stubbornly. One day I thought, he'll say it again. But not in a dining room. Not as a warning. As a headline. As a whisper in a room full of strangers watching me take a stage he never thought I'd stand on. Before I tell you how that moment really happened, if you've ever been told you're too small, too soft, too late, if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, leave a comment. Not for sympathy. For the record, because some blueprints aren't made from stone or steel. Some are made from silence, waiting to be built. My father's words didn't just kill dinner. They burned away the last shred of trust in me. The room went still, like someone had knocked the wind out of Sunday. No one said a word. Not my mother, who kept adjusting her napkin even though it hadn't moved. Not my brothers, who glanced at each other with that smug silence that's louder than applause. And definitely not my father, who sat back in his chair like a judge who delivered the final ruling. The roast smelled like rosemary and betrayal. I pushed my fork aside. "Excuse me," I said, standing too quickly. The chair scraped behind me like a warning. No one stopped me. Not even her. My mother's gaze found her plate like it was safer than the battlefield unfolding 3 feet away. I walked through the hallway where our family portraits hung like a timeline of diminishing returns. In every photo, my father's hand rested proudly on one of my brother's shoulders. I was always off to the side, holding a ribbon or a certificate no one asked about. Outside, the early spring air in Blue Hill hadn't made up its mind, still sharp around the edges, still stubborn with frost. My boots crunched across the gravel driveway. I didn't know where I was going, only that it couldn't be here. Not after that. Not after he looked me in the eye and said I wasn't built for anything but excuses. He didn't even yell. That was the worst part. It wasn't anger. It was certainty. The kind of belief that had festered in him for years but finally slipped into words like poison leaking from a cracked bottle. I drove without a destination, letting the Ohio roads take me wherever they wanted. Each passing mile peeled away a layer of calm until nothing was left but raw, stinging memory. I remembered being 10 and winning the state math contest. The trophy was taller than my knees. I ran up to him, breathless, and asked, "Are you proud that I'm better at math than your brothers?" He smiled and said nothing. Silence was his favorite way of withholding love. Polished. Polite. Denial disguised as dignity. I should have seen it then. But hope is a tricky habit, even when it limps. An hour later, I pulled the car to the side of a quiet service road that looked over a frozen field. The moon lit the grass in silver and grief. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned pale, then let out a yell that broke in my chest halfway through. Not from pain. From rage. I'll make you say it again. In front of America. Not just to me. Not in that dining room where his power was unshakable. I would drag the truth into the daylight. I would build something so undeniable, so loud, he'd have no choice but to choke on the silence he once fed me. But first, I needed to start. I drove back to the apartment I rented above a laundromat on 5th. The hallway light flickered like it was nervous, too. I walked inside, dropped my coat on the couch, and stood there for a moment. just breathing. The air smelled like reheated ambition. There, taped to the wall above my monitor, was another rejection slip. Number 7 this month. Angel investors didn't want another predictive AI for stock volatility. They wanted flash, hype, male co-founders. But in the corner of the screen, the code was still running. A silent rebellion, calculating patterns, feeding on real-time market noise. No sleep, no ego. Just math. Beautiful, brutal math. I leaned closer. The AI had flagged an anomaly in pre-market sentiment for a small biotech stock. It wasn't the first time, but this time, the margin was different. Sharper. I reached for my phone. A voicemail icon blinked softly. Press play. My mother's voice, gentle and tired. I always believed in you, even though your father couldn't see it. I stood in the blue glow of the monitor, heart cracked open. Her voice faded, but the code kept humming. So did the fury. And underneath it, something sturdier. Determination wrapped in steel. Back at the apartment, Blair opens the monitor. Another rejection slip is taped to the wall. But in the corner of the desk, the code is still running. You've got a clever mind, Blair. But in this world, clever isn't enough, unless someone bets on it. Vivian Cain said it like she had seen too many clever people fail. The kind of failure that wasn't loud, just permanent. I sat across from her in a corner booth at a cafe in Midtown Manhattan that tried too hard to look effortless. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, coffee served in glasses without handles. My hands were still trembling from the walk here. Or maybe from the month of rejections. Probably both. That morning, I'd posted 3 more rejection emails to the wall above my monitor. I called them my fuel board. Some people used vision boards. I used proof that I was still too much, or too little, for everyone else. Then Vivian's email arrived like a trapdoor opening beneath my bitterness. Subject line, "Your deck intrigued me." That was all it said. I replied in under 3 minutes. Now here she was, Vivian Cain. The founder who'd lost everything at 35 and came back swinging with blackline capital like a woman who refused to fade. There was something jagged about her. Not cruel, just cauterized. She flipped through my pitch deck on her tablet like she already knew what was coming. Predictive stock volatility using NLP sentiment waves? She said. Ballsy, especially in this market. I cleared my throat. I don't have the full data fire hose yet, but the backtests? I saw them. You're not wrong. Her eyes didn't leave the screen. But being right doesn't make you money. Being early does. I hated that she was right. Loved that she was saying it. I'm offering $7 million, she said suddenly, sliding a thumb drive across the table. Memorandum of Understanding, 3-month license on the model, exclusive trial. You'll still own it. The world went blurry for a second. Or maybe it just tilted. I blinked. Why me? Vivian gave a half smile that didn't touch her eyes. Because you're not cute about it. You're angry. Angry founders build things that break markets. I laughed because if I didn't, I'd cry. When she stood, I followed her outside. Spring had softened the streets just enough to trick you into thinking New York was kind. She lit a cigarette with the wind shielding her flame, then looked over her shoulder. You remind me of myself before I started listening to men who told me I was too much. She exhaled. Don't listen to them. Unless they write checks. Back at my apartment in Brooklyn, I stared at the thumb drive like it might vanish. My phone buzzed. Voicemail from Mom. Again. Her voice soft as always. Mom always believes in me even though my dad can't see. It wasn't new, but it still ached. The kind of ache that turned into resolve. I opened the licensing packet. Pages full of clauses, contingencies, blackline edits. I didn't understand half of it, but I understood enough. This was oxygen. I signed. Just before hitting send, I looked up at the only photo on my desk, the one I'd placed after that disastrous dinner in Blue Hill. My mother, smiling in front of a garden she never got to call hers. She looked like hope in bloom. I picked up a marker and wrote on the back of a Post-it, Lucent, a name that meant shining or clear. The model deserved something better than just V3.4B, and she deserved a name that meant something. That night, as I ran final diagnostics, a Zoom window opened for a routine onboarding. Vivian's camera was off, but I could hear her typing. In the corner of her frame, a man leaned forward and peered at my code. His hair was silver, combed too neatly. His eyes scanned faster than was comfortable. He didn't introduce himself. Vivian noticed him and tilted her screen just enough to obscure him. "Technical advisor," she muttered. "Don't mind Harold. He's just thorough." Something about the way she said his name made my stomach shift. I didn't press. Blair posts a picture of her mother on her desk, naming the new model, Lucent. "We regret to inform you that Blackline Capital is terminating the agreement, effective immediately." That one sentence did what months of rejection hadn't managed. It knocked the breath out of me. I reread the email again, hoping it would morph into a joke. The blue glow from my monitor didn't flinch. It stayed cold, final, like the walls around me. I tried calling Vivian. Voicemail. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I didn't scream. Not yet. Not while I still didn't understand why. I threw on a coat over my sweatshirt, shoved my laptop into a canvas bag, and ran 5 blocks to the subway. The whole ride, I stared into my reflection in the window. Hollow-eyed, lips pressed tight. Who pulls the rug after placing it? By the time I arrived at Blackline's building in downtown San Francisco, the sky was bruising into dusk. I swiped my guest badge at the elevator. Red light. Access denied. The security guard at the front desk looked up from his crossword puzzle. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You've been removed from the system." The word removed landed harder than it should have, like I was never meant to be there. Like Vivian's handshake was just a temporary seat at a table they'd already cleared. I turned away without saying anything. I didn't trust my voice to carry anything but a scream. The closest bar I could find in Brooklyn had peeling wood panels and a jukebox that hadn't worked since before smartphones. I sat in a corner booth and nursed a drink I didn't like. My phone buzzed, and for a second I thought it might be Vivian. It was Caleb. "Hey," he said, voice cautious. "I saw the headlines." "What headlines?" There was a pause. He sighed. "Tech Start News. Rogue AI model licensed by Blackline backfires. Contract nullified in emergency meeting. They're blaming instability in your algorithm." I laughed, bitter and dry. They signed off on that code. It didn't backfire. Someone just wanted it buried. Silence. Then Caleb said, "Come over. I've got tea and questions." I showed up at his brownstone around midnight. He opened the door like he'd been waiting all evening. "You look like hell," he said, stepping aside. "You're not wrong." I sat on his couch, fingers still twitching from the adrenaline that hadn't worn off. Caleb disappeared into the kitchen and came back with 2 mugs of chamomile. "I know who sabotaged you," he said without fanfare. I looked up. "Vivian?" "Number, not exactly." He reached into a manila folder on his coffee table and pulled out a printed screenshot. "Do you recognize this file name?" he asked. W. Monroe, copy.pdf. It felt like someone poured ice water down my spine. "No," I whispered, even though I did. Metadata was embedded in the anonymous complaint file that triggered the Blackline audit, he continued, created by someone using the handle W. Monroe. I shook my head. That could be anyone. It's a common name. "It gets better," he said. "Vivian's technical advisor, Harold Finch, used to work for your father." I blinked. "What?" Landtech Ventures. CFO for 8 years before early retirement. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. My father had always been quiet about his network. Said people who bragged about connections were the ones who didn't really have any. I guess he believed in keeping assassins on a leash. Before I could respond, Caleb added, I want you to meet someone. He stepped into the hallway and returned with a woman in her mid-40s. Blazer. Tired eyes. Fire barely hidden beneath composure. Blair, he said. This is Diana Park. She nodded. I believed in Mr. Monroe once, until he fired me for proposing a switch to automation in his supply chain. Said machines don't raise families. I stared at her. I built a prototype that could have doubled his margins. He killed it and blacklisted me. She sat down, pulling a USB drive from her purse. This contains archive metadata from a secure channel, one of the flagged files from the Blackline report, created under your father's name. I didn't ask how she got it. I didn't want to know. What mattered was that it existed. Proof that the man who told me I couldn't succeed had ensured I wouldn't. I didn't cry. Instead, I stood up, walked to the window, and pressed my forehead to the glass. The night outside looked different now. Not darker, just clearer. I opened my mouth, barely a whisper. You buried me once. Now I am a tree, and I am growing again. They tried to burn me, but I was fireproof. I don't need an interview. I need a comeback. That thought played on loop in my head as I stood in Caleb's living room, now a war room of sorts. Wires, coffee mugs, post-it notes layered like battle plans. The ghost of my father's sabotage clung to every surface, but so did the scent of something else. Reclamation. Diana had commandeered the corner desk, setting up a workstation like it was a lab. She wore her concentration like armor, eyes darting between lines of code, lips pressed tight. Lucent V2 needs to be leaner, she said without looking at me. Smarter. Less predict and plot, more adaptive real-time thresholds. I agree, I replied, cracking my knuckles. We don't build walls anymore. We build reflexes. We started from nothing. The first version had been ripped from me, twisted into a media circus, and then buried like a scandal. But this one would be forged. The rebuild wasn't just technical. It was spiritual. We pulled 16-hour days. Caleb brought food, handled email firestorms, and blocked calls I didn't want. He never asked how I was. He just made sure I had water, light, and silence, the kind that lets your demons speak so you can shut them up. Late one night, Diana looked up and said, I found it. I leaned over her shoulder. She enlarged the metadata tag. File name, wmonroecopy.pdf timestamp 8:13 a.m. Blue Hill, Ohio. She clicked open the geolocation trace. Blair. Her voice softened. This wasn't some random attack. This was orchestrated. I nodded. No panic, just clarity. I need to go back, I said. Blue Hill. Caleb offered to drive, but I said no. This part I had to do alone. I arrived just after dawn. The streets hadn't changed. Same cracked sidewalks, same bakery with the bell that jingled too loud. I parked across from the little corner cafe where the IP trace had led. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and regret. A man in his 60s worked the register. I walked up and placed a photo of my father on the counter. Was he here last Tuesday morning? I asked. The man glanced at the picture. Yeah, used that corner machine by the window. Typed a lot. Paid in cash. That was it. I didn't need a confession. I needed proof. And now I had it from every angle, digital and physical. He'd tried to sink me with his name as the anchor, but I wasn't drowning anymore. Back in Brooklyn, the Lucent Engine V2 was nearly ready. Jordan Patel flew in from LA for a demo. He shook my hand once. Firm grip, sharp eyes. I don't invest in emotion, Ms. Monroe, he said, placing his coffee down without drinking. I invest in product. I respected that. We didn't small talk. The simulation ran like music. Precision, adaptability, a 20% increase in forecast accuracy across volatile indexes. Diana grinned quietly. Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Jordan stayed silent for 30 full seconds. Then he nodded once. I'll wire the first tranche, he said. But I expect a live pitch next quarter. Stage, audience, no hiding. I wouldn't dream of it. That night, I sat alone by the window. Rain tapped against the glass like a slow applause. Diana walked over, holding 2 cups of tea. "People like us," she said. "We get overlooked until it's too late for them to stop us." I smiled, softer than I'd been in weeks. "Did you ever think," I asked, "that maybe the people who break us just fear we'll build something they can't control?" She clinked her cup against mine. "And now we do it anyway." From the other room, Caleb called out, "Blair, you've got mail." I walked over, expecting a bill or another investor doc. Instead, it was a digital envelope marked Future of Finance Conference, Invitation to Speak Topic, Building Through Ashes. "There's a storm coming," Diana said. I replied, "Good." I brought lightning. The doors of Moscone Center were already thrumming when I arrived. People rushed in with lanyards swinging, laptops under arms, voices loud with caffeine and capital. I moved through the crowd like a ghost among suits. Final keynote, full house, live feed to over 1 million viewers. This time, I wasn't the rejected founder. I wasn't the failed daughter. I was the storm. Diana stood backstage, checking the slides one last time. Her fingers hovered over the touchscreen. "Everything's set," she said, not looking at me. "Are you?" I took a slow breath. I was born ready. They just didn't notice. Jordan Patel gave me a short nod from the shadows. No advice, no platitudes. He was a man who respected results, not rituals. A voice in my earpiece. "Blair Monroe, you're live in 30 seconds. I stepped out. A sea of faces blinked under soft blue lights. The camera drone hovered, scanning expressions, logging reactions, broadcasting my entrance to living rooms and boardrooms across America. Behind me, the screen lit up. Lucent V2, Adaptive Market Intelligence for a Fractal World. I didn't start with stats. I started with truth. 3 years ago, I applied for 117 funding rounds. I was told I lacked leadership, traction, credibility, and once charisma. Laughter rippled. I smiled. I didn't stop. I built. And this, I gestured toward the screen, is what all those no's created? I walked them through Lucent's engine. How it recognized behavioral patterns in micro-investors versus hedge funds. How it simulated external disruptions. How it didn't just predict markets. It adapted to them. "Lucent doesn't assume you're perfect," I said. "It assumes you're real. And it adjusts, because survival is intelligence." Midway, I could see Diana in the tech booth, nodding subtly. Then I said it. "I built this from rejection. Every no made this model smarter." That's when they stood. The audience, thousands of them. A wave of movement like something tectonic. I could barely hear my own breath over the applause. But 2,000 people clapping wasn't the most important reaction. Halfway across the country, in a quiet living room in Blue Hill, Ohio, Walter Monroe sat frozen. His coffee cup trembled, then slipped from his hand, shattering across the hardwood. His phone vibrated with a message from his sister. "Is that your daughter trending nationwide?" The live stream flickered back to me as I walked to the final slide. A photo appeared behind me. Soft, grainy, but radiant. It was my mother. Her voice echoed in my memory from a voicemail I'd saved. "Your mind is the garden, Blair. Keep it blooming." I said it aloud, not as a farewell, as a signature. The room went quiet. The silence was thicker than applause, the kind that carries reverence. I let it breathe, let the truth settle like gold dust. Then I bowed my head and walked off stage. In the green room, my phone buzzed, a missed call. The screen simply read, DAD. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Blair," Walter said. I replied, "I didn't come here to forgive. I came to lead." He looked smaller than I remembered. The mahogany desk that once felt imposing now looked like dead wood. Sun-faded, nicked at the edges. The walls of Monroe landscaping bore cracks from neglect. Boxes sat half-packed, and a foreclosure warning was taped to the side door. Outside, Blue Hill was thawing from winter, crocuses pushing through frost-crusted soil. It felt metaphorical. Walter stood by the window, back turned, shoulders heavy under the weight of something I no longer needed to name. "I thought," he began, clearing his throat. "I didn't think a kid like you could succeed. I aborted you. Not because I hated you, but because I was afraid of being left behind." I didn't flinch. "I didn't need your belief, Dad," I said, placing a contract on the table. "I built belief from scratch." He turned around slowly. His hands trembled as he scanned the papers. "I'm acquiring this company," I explained. "You'll retain your name, but not your seat. We're converting the operation into a tech extension hub. Automation, climate-based planning, AI-led workflows for agriculture. Diana will run integration. I'll own 70%. You can either retire quietly or help sweep the floors." For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, slowly, deliberately, he nodded and bowed. Not a dramatic gesture. Not a fall-to-your-knees apology. Just the slightest forward bend. But enough to fracture decades of silence. I didn't gloat. Because I wasn't here to punish him. I was here to transform what he broke. 3 weeks later, we cut the ribbon outside an old, converted barn on the edge of town. The wood was sanded down, repainted white. Solar panels glinted on the roof. Inside, rows of modular desks, server stacks, whiteboards half covered in equations. Above the door was the new name, carved in brushed metal, Marion Park. Below it, in looping cursive, was the quote, "Your mind is the garden. Keep it blooming." That was the only revenge I needed. Rebirth. Diana stood beside me, clipboard in hand, already onboarding the first cohort. 12 girls from rural counties, some barely able to afford a laptop. Now they were building vision models and reinforcement training frameworks. Caleb's name blinked on my phone. A voice note. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for building Lucent, but for proving that justice can be engineered too." The wind caught my coat as I turned toward the press cameras waiting nearby. I didn't wave. I looked into the lens and said clearly, "He told me I had no head for success." Funny, now they're all coming to me for the blueprint. They thought I would fade, that I'd return to Blue Hill with my tail tucked, just another failed founder from a broken town. Maybe that was their comfort. The idea that I was never built to last. But the truth is, I wasn't built. I built myself. From voicemail fragments left by a mother who believed in me when no one else did. From code stitched together on sleepless nights and ramen-stained keyboards. From the silence of rejection emails tacked onto my wall like war medals. From every dinner table humiliation, every "you're not like your brothers," every smile that said "good girl" but meant "know your place." I remember the look in his eyes, my father's, not when I signed my first check, but when I handed him the acquisition papers. He didn't see a daughter. He saw inevitability. And I didn't smile. Because justice isn't joy. It's weight being lifted after years of being buried beneath it. Lucent didn't just rebuild my reputation, it rebuilt me. And when the world clapped as I stepped onto the future of finance stage, when the hashtag Manja Blair is back circled across a million screens, when he dropped his coffee cup in front of our relatives and watched the girl he once dismissed rewrite the rules, I felt nothing but stillness. Because the moment I realized I no longer needed his approval was the moment I became unshakable. I named the lab Marion Park, a fusion of two women, the one who birthed me and the one who helped me resurrect. Together, they shaped a space where underdog minds learn to rise. No more gatekeepers, no more fathers at the head of the table telling daughters what they can't be. And in that space, I don't lecture. I listen, because the next Blair is already here. Her code just hasn't compiled yet. So, no, I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to rewrite the blueprint. And this time, it's not made of stone or ego. It's made of gardens, the kind that bloom under pressure and refuse to die in the dark. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it roots deep beneath the noise and waits for the right season. They told her she had no head for success. But now, the world follows the very footsteps they tried to erase. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, truth may arrive late, but once heard, it resonates forever. And if this story felt familiar to you, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, only to prove otherwise through your own quiet work, thank you for listening until the end. I didn't share this for applause. I shared it because sometimes the hardest battles happen in silence. At family dinners, in ignored emails, in rooms where your name is left off the list. But that doesn't mean you lost. It means you're still building. If you've ever felt that weight, leave a comment. Tell me how you turned someone's no into your own blueprint. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, about quiet resilience, justice that doesn't need revenge, and voices that rise from silence, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for being here. And remember, you don't need anyone's permission to build the life they said you couldn't.